Hey, it's Scott from and John from T is for Tactical, and there's a lot of conversation, is what I'll say, about AR-15 rifles, and you had a general come out and say that they're a weapon of war, and some people saying that the AR rifle, the AR type rifles, they need to be banned. You can't get them until you're 21 years of age, and things like that. Well, I think there's a lot of information out there. So let me just talk about some facts and some instances with AR-15 rifles. I'm going to compare them to handguns, and I'm going to let you make up your own mind, okay? And we'll go from there, all right? So first of all, you have handguns. Handguns are primarily a defensive firearm. Police carry them all the time. Our military doesn't really carry them all the time. Matter of fact, if you are familiar with SEAL Team 6, a lot of the SEAL team members on there, they will not carry, or they do not carry a handgun, just because they're so adept at running that AR type rifle that they can utilize that rifle and not depend upon a backup. So where I'm going with this is that the handgun is a truly defensive weapon. As some gun authors or gun trainers have said, a handgun is what you use to fight your way to a rifle, okay? When you look at the differences between a handgun and a rifle, a handgun is basically a handgun. You take your hand, to put it in simplest terms, and you put it on the gun. And you take your other hand and you put it on the gun, and you have two hands on one spot of the gun. When you have a rifle, you take your hand, you put it on the grip, you put it on the forestock, you put your shoulder on it, you put your cheek on it, sometimes you even put your nose on it. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of contact on the firearm, thus making it a more accurate and more controllable firearm, okay? You also have a longer sight radius, which allows you to have a better, I don't want to say perspective, but at least, a longer sight radius allows for more accuracy, okay? All right, so those are some of the very basic differences between a handgun and a rifle. The other thing that you should realize is that, and again, I got a couple dummy rounds here, and I'll just use these for cartridge size perspective, is that you have a bottlenecked rifle cartridge versus a straight-walled pistol cartridge. This bottleneck pistol cartridge can carry a lot more pressure, or have a lot more pressure than this handgun cartridge here. Case in point is look at the devastating effects of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, okay? What we saw there was some devastating effects because of the different cartridge types. Now, most AR type 15 cartridges, when you look at bullets and the configuration and the designation of them, the bullet has a weight to it. When you look at and purchase bullets, you're going to look at most AR-15 bullets are like 55 grain or 62 grain or maybe even 77 grain, right? So it's 55 grains in the bullet weight, not 55 grains in the powder, okay? Handguns are kind of designated the same way. Many 9mm handguns are 115 grain. That refers to the weight of bullet, not the weight of the powder. So really at the end of the day, what you have is you have a difference of 115 grain weight bullet in the handgun and 55 grain bullet in the rifle. When you look at true ballistics and trajectory and things along those lines, the handgun bullet is probably leaving the board about 1,000 feet per second, and the AR-15 type bullet is probably leaving at about 2,700 feet per second. Quite a difference in velocity. However, we all know from physics that if something's moving at a high rate of speed, it's very lightweight. It has the ability to be disturbed very easily. Okay, the handgun, not so much, right? So when we're looking at things like passing through sheetrock and different things like that, that's where you really have to spend a lot of time and really consider things. As far as your penetration, your ballistics, when it comes down to selecting a firearm for home defense or for defending yourself. All right. The other thing that I just want to talk about is that when you look at wound ballistics, really, when it comes down to handgun cartridges, what does a handgun cartridge really do? Well, a handgun cartridge gives you a puncture wound. And we've all probably had a puncture wound where we're cutting a turkey at Thanksgiving, or nailing a picture frame, or whatever the case may be. what really happens with a puncture wound. Puncture wound, you get a puncture in your flesh, and whether the projectile or the device goes through your skin or whatever the case may be, your flesh, the human body is one of the most magnificent healers. That flesh will actually close around that hole and start clotting and start to heal right away. Okay, so handguns provide a simple puncture wound. What happens with AR-15 type bullets is that they provide a very high ballistic, and they can have some very devastating effects when it comes down to the speed and the fragmentation of the bullet and all those things when it comes down to hitting flesh. So you have a very distinctive difference between a handgun wound and a rifle wound. And again, we saw that with the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, the devastating effects after that. Now listen, I'm not saying it's good, bad, and different. I'm just saying it's just one of these things that you have to take into consideration, right? When it comes down to defending yourself. And when it comes down to defending yourself, even if you don't carry a gun, there's a couple things that I want you to understand, right? Is that, as a law enforcement officer, I was always afraid of a couple different things. Number one is the guy that conceals a knife on his body and hides it, right? And has it in his hand, right? And at the last minute, gets together with you, befriends you, whatever the case may be, and takes that knife and has the ability to activate, well, I'm not doing so good here, but has the ability to activate that knife and can switch this knife all over the place, right? Now, with the way that I was moving that, I could have cut your jugular, I could have cut your brachial, I could have cut your femoral, all those things with this simple arc like this, right? Now, if I have a handgun in my hand, not only do I have to produce that handgun, right, but I have to produce that handgun and I have to point it at you. So you have to be worried about the path of the bullet and not necessarily anything else other than that. So if you can move off the path of that bullet, you're relatively safe, right? And that can be a dynamic situation. That can change and all those things. So, the two things that used to worry me were, again, concealed blades and that type of stuff, because you can put that blade anywhere, right? And, the same thing, but the same thing, not the same thing, but the thing with a handgun, now we're getting into a little bit larger platform, right? And again, that bullet is only going to be effective when it comes out of that bore straight and hits whatever it's going to hit. The moment that I take that bore and move it, right, then I'm safe. So if I can take that handgun and I can get a hand on that and I can move that there and I can get my hand in myself into a position where I can push the gun away, push the bad guy down to the ground or whatever the case may be, then I'm talking a little bit more about, some self-defense tactics and stuff like that. But at the same time, I have to understand the device is trying to harm me. Okay, I have to understand the device is trying to harm me and what's this going to do with me, right? So handguns are somewhat concealable, right? Knives are a lot more concealable. AR-15s really aren't so concealable. So part of where I'm going with this is if you're in the parking lot of a convenience store or you're in the parking lot of a school or a grocery store, a big grocery store or something like that, and you see a person taking a bag out of their car, or even more plainly that, you see a person doing something like this and putting it into a shopping cart and going in the direction of a Walmart, don't hang around. Get on 911 and make that emergency call, right? So where I'm going with this is this gun here, right, is more devastating to more people, right, which I don't disagree with, but it's much more harder to get this gun implement it into a lethal force situation, into an active shooter situation. This gun here is a little bit easier, and I don't know if you know this or not, but statistically, you can look at this on the FBI website. Statistically, handguns are 77% more likely to be used in an active shooter situation. Handguns are 77% more. Why is that? Because they're more concealable. Because people know that if I take this gun out of the back of my car, it's going to probably raise some bells. And there's a little bit higher learning curve to use a gun like this than there is to initially use a handgun. So if we go back to some of our recent things like that have happened, right? Again, look at these ballistics and, take these things into consideration. Now, listen, I'm not saying that active shooters should not be stopped. They should definitely be stopped. And there's a lot of things that go behind here. But again, the purpose of this video is to provide some information and to provide some facts when it comes and some realistic facts when it comes down to the differences between cutting instruments, handguns, and rifles. Okay. So take these things into consideration when you're doing some education on these things, or you're trying to make an argument one way or another, and make your own decisions, okay? And again, if you have any questions about these things, you want some further training, you want to learn a little bit more information about either of these platforms, again, it's a matter of learning your tools and learning what they can do, and learning how they all work and what works correctly for you. Okay, so keep an open mind, and protect your rights of self-defense, because really what this comes down to is a matter of self-defense. I don't care if you're using a blade, a knife, a gun, a taser, like I say, a club, anything like that. It's just the means that you're trying to defend yourself with. You all certainly have a right to do that. Okay. So like I say, any questions, reach out for us, comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you need some training, hit us up. We'll come out to you. Again, it's Scott and John from T is for Tactical. Hope to hear from you soon.